Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines. We're pleased to have on the show the Executive Director for Mothers Against Drunk Driving for the State of Louisiana, Donna Tate. She's going to talk to us about the goal of MADD, which is to eliminate drunk driving, period. And the beauty is it is achievable. Two ways. One, make the right decision and don't drink and drive. But secondly, technology is now developing that will enable us to prevent folks from getting in cars and driving drunk. So join us on the next Legal Lines with the Executive Director of MADD, Donna Tate. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself, Sean Fagan, and Corey Ogeron, and our entire staff for letting us come into your homes for the last 10 years via Legal Lines. We hope that you've come to a greater understanding of how the law works and how the government works for you. So from all of us, thank you. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have on the show today Donna Tate. She's the Executive Director for the Louisiana chapter of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, better known as MADD. Donna, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Locke.
I'm really looking forward to discussing this. I was reviewing all the materials and the website. It's an unbelievable amount of information, and it's dealing with just a huge issue, not only for our state, but really the whole nation.
MADD's mission is to stop drunk driving, to prevent underage drinking, and to support the victims of both of those events. And it is so far-reaching, but the thing people need to know is that they can get involved before it happens to them and prevent it from happening.
Right, and what I love is, and I was telling you this earlier, I love just the big goal, and that is to stop drunk driving. And it's real simple and clear, and you know, I think probably most of the culture kind of goes, well, is that really possible? And the answer is yes.
MADD's campaign to eliminate drunk driving is very, very achievable. It's a decision. Good people make bad decisions, and bad things happen when you choose to drink and drive. I've yet to meet an offender who said, well, I think I'll have a few drinks at dinner, I'll get in my car and I'll injure somebody, myself, or kill somebody or myself. It just doesn't happen that way. And
destroy their families.
Exactly.
Either because they've lost a loved one or they're taking care of them the rest of their life.
That's exactly right.
You know, the other interesting side of this, and we'll talk about each in a minute, but the fact that we're talking about a decision has to be made, and that is don't drink and then drive. But there's also now a whole new component to this, and that is technology that empowers society to not allow this event to occur.
Absolutely. Right now there's technology available, and Louisiana was one of the first 4 states to institute a law that requires...
I love hearing that we're first at something. I love it.
We do too. We were one of the first 4 states to implement a law requiring all convicted drunk drivers to have an ignition interlock device installed in their car.
All right, explain to the folks what that is, an ignition locking system.
Yeah, it's an ignition interlock system. Most people call it the breath machine. It's a device that's installed in your vehicle, and you're required to blow into it prior to being able to start the vehicle. And if you register above a certain level of alcohol, and remember, these are convicted drunk drivers, so it's a low level, 0.02,
below 0.08.
That's right, because they've already shown that they have the proclivity to do this. It won't allow the car to start if you blow above a certain level. And we've seen double-digit decreases in other states, New Mexico, for example, where convicted drunk drivers don't repeat the offense when this device is used properly.
Fantastic. Because, you know, you hear the horror stories of 5th and 6th offense, and so they're getting whacked, and they're getting back in the car even though they have a suspended license or it's been revoked. And they're still driving. And this is a way to just prevent that from occurring.
Absolutely. And if we could increase implementation in Louisiana, we would go a lot further. We average roughly 30,000 arrests. There's not any good data on the convictions, so there's a little disconnect there, but we know we only have about 4,000 devices on the roads.
Say that again. That's a big number for a little bit of...
Yeah, there are 30,000 arrests each
year. So 30,000 folks every year in Louisiana
are
arrested for drunk driving, and yet there are only 4,000 prosecutions.
Well, 4,000 convictions that require an interlock device to be installed that are on record.
Okay, so there may be other convictions, but
they're not getting the device.
Only 4,000 are using this technology to make sure those folks don't get back. Why?
That's right.
Why is that so low?
That's a question that we're trying to get an answer to. MADD supports all of the research that's going into it. The Louisiana Highway Safety Commission has commissioned some studies and information to collect more information around why is it happening. NHTSA has held an Ignition Interlock Institute here in New Orleans last year. So there's a lot of focus on how do we take that technology, how do we implement it effectively, and how do we reduce the rates of repeat offenses.
Well, explain the process to me. So if I go out and I get tanked up and the cops pull me over because I'm an idiot and I'm going to either kill myself or someone else, I'm taken downtown, usually put in jail, have all the hearings, the judge finds me guilty or I plead guilty, and as part of that guilty plea or probation or whatever the ending of the proceedings is, I have to have this device put in my vehicle? Who pays for it?
You have to pay for it. It's a cost purely to the offender. It costs the taxpayer nothing. There's a monthly fee that they have to pay and an installation and removal fee that they pay.
And what do those fees range?
Installation ranges $60 to $80, and then the monthly fee, I believe, runs $30 to $40 a month for the calibration and the reporting features that go with it.
And is there private companies that provide this service? So it's not the government doing it, it's private companies?
Private industry.
Okay. And what happens if an individual who is told by the court they have to do that doesn't have the resources? Who provides them then?
At this point, Louisiana doesn't have an indigent fund, and that's one of the gaps.
Okay.
That's
what I was thinking, is that a lot of folks I mean, I don't know the stats on this, but I would assume a lot of folks who are drinking and driving are medicating their pain or they're addicted. In other words, they're not doing real well economically. And so what the court is faced with is folks who can't afford this.
Yeah, that is a factor.
And so how are we addressing it?
At this point, the best way to address it is legislatively through creating an indigent fund. You have to be very careful in how you craft that and set it up. New Mexico did do that. They had some success. They also bankrupted their fund. So it's a delicate balance of how do people qualify for that indigent fund and how is it implemented and carried out.
It's so interesting because, we're talking about the expense of something that's, less than $100 to put in and less than $100 to monitor a month. And the cost of drunk driving and the injuries that result or the deaths that occur are staggering. Explain to the folks what that is.
In Louisiana, $1.45 billion a year.
Every year.
Related to drunk driving fatalities.
How does that break down? I mean, is that medical care?
Break it down. It's a formula that NHTSA created many years ago, and it factors in the healthcare costs, the insurance costs, the lost time from work, really the total impact to the community.
You said New Mexico had this fund. What would be required for the state to come up with such a type of fund, and who implements it? Is it state? Is it local government? How does this work? Does the sheriff, cities? How does it work?
Well, a piece of it definitely has to be the enforcement piece, and the administration has to be carefully thought out. How best that works in Louisiana, I don't really have the perfect answer to. We can look to other states who've been successful at it, and there are some who are in the fledgling stages of being more successful, to craft what really fits and works here and how large is our indigency problem.
So the money, though, to pay for this, because when it's all said and done, it always seems to come back to the dollars, would have to come from the state government allocating funds for that, or what?
Absolutely not.
Okay, explain
in New Mexico, one of the things that they did was set a fee to the offender. A portion of that fee goes into fund indigent people who can't afford the devices in their cars. So the brunt of the expense can actually be on the offender's back and not on the taxpayer.
And we're talking about drunk driving offenders only?
Absolutely.
So any funds or you could add an additional charge to those offenders, which is specifically dedicated for that fund.
Absolutely.
And what we're doing is we're making sure, even though those folks can't pay for it, at least they're not getting back on the road, killing our babies or our loved ones or maiming them for life.
Yes, indeed.
What other technologies exist right now or that are coming online in this kind of regard? Well,
nationally, there's a Blue Ribbon panel, and it's available online for people who are interested at dadss.org. For 5 years now, MADD has supported the Institute for Highway Safety and a number of different organizations in the research of passive devices that would be installed in every vehicle.
So this is federal government's doing some research. All right, let's continue this on the next segment.
Okay.
This is Locke Meredith, Legal Lines, Donna Tate for MADD. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, And I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself, Sean Fagan, and Corey Ogeron, and our entire staff for letting us come into your homes for the last 10 years via Legal Lines. We hope that you've come to a greater understanding of how the law works and how the government works for you. So from all of us, thank you. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and pleased to have on the show today Donna Tate. She's the Executive Director for Mothers Against Drunk Driving here in Louisiana. Donna, again, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
We're talking about the technology that has developed that prevents folks getting in a vehicle and driving drunk. And you talked about this system that exists that prevents somebody from starting their car. What other technologies? You were talking about the federal government is financing, or has financed in the past anyway, technologies. Explain that.
Nationally, we're 5 years into a project, and it's available online, dads.org.
That's D-A-D-D-S-S?
DADSS.org.
Okay. Knew there was two S's somewhere.
Yeah. And we're 5 years into the project. Actually, in front of the Congress now is a renewal of the Road Safe Act, which includes $12 million to continue the research. It's not any new additional money to taxpayers, but they're in the pilot stages of creating devices that would be passive, just like our seatbelts are to us today, but that would measure a driver's blood alcohol content and not allow them to start the car if they were over the legal limit of 0.08. That's different than an ignition interlock device, which you actually have to blow into and it would register at a lower level. These are devices that would be incorporated into the steering wheel, into your seat, even potentially into the rear view mirror that would measure signs of impairment.
Really? And $12 million is to further research this technology?
Is to finalize the research. They've
so the
actually
research
developed,
has been done. So they're ready to go.
We have 3 devices, and this is not MADD research. This is a coalition of groups from across the country, including automobile manufacturers. And they have 3 pilot devices that they're working on at this point in time that they're beginning to look at how do we incorporate it into the vehicle, how do we make it low cost, high sensitivity, and something that doesn't interfere with a sober driver.
So this is like another technology, like the beeper as you're backing up and you sense a kid or something behind you and you don't run over. That didn't used to exist 5 years ago. Now it's part of a lot of the new cars. This would be a technology that would keep drunk folks from getting behind a wheel.
Exactly. And
which is something we all want.
Absolutely. Safety should be the #1 desire, but the other piece of it is that there would be a offset, we believe, and the insurance industry believes, in the cost for insurance premiums for people to offset the cost of the device in the car. So where, yes, this is another piece of equipment on your vehicle that adds to the price of your vehicle,
reduction
you're
in
going to get
insurance.
it back on the back end.
Gotcha. Let's shift gears just a little bit. There's kind of some programs or focuses that MADD has in Louisiana right now, and it may be nationally, where you're focusing on the heroes, blow before you go, and then it was this technology we were just talking about. Explain that to the folks.
This November we'll celebrate the 5th anniversary of our campaign to eliminate drunk driving. And we believe we can make drunk driving the equivalent of eradicating polio, because it's about a decision and it's affecting that decision point. The 3 prongs of the campaign are to support the heroes that keep our roads safe.
Police officers.
That's right. They're out there doing
Sheriff
those checkpoints.
officers.
How many of us wave and say thank you as you drive through that DWI checkpoint?
That's right.
We don't.
We should.
We should. Absolutely should, because they're keeping us safe. They're either arresting the drunk drivers that they're finding, or they're deterring drunk drivers from being on the road. A very successful checkpoint is one that doesn't catch anybody.
And I think I was reading that 1 in 3 people is going to be involved in an automobile collision where drunk drivers involved.
That's right. 1 in 3 American families are affected. We serve a victim every 9 minutes.
Huge statistic. And so focus on police officers and giving them the tools they need and the legislation they need to stop folks from driving drunk. If they're in their car, bust them.
Absolutely.
Get them off the street. All right.
Absolutely.
And the other focus is the blow before you go up.
That's right. The second prong is to require convicted drunk drivers to blow before they go. And that's the first device I talked about, the ignition interlock device. And we're fortunate to have that here in Louisiana. We need to tighten up implementation.
And we've talked about the third component, which was really part of that.
Turning cars into the cure.
And the technology is there in some respects and is certainly moving in that direction now.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about where Louisiana ranks in this whole just horrible event of drunk driving. I was reading that we're 40th, but I didn't really know what that meant. Explain.
Well, it all depends on what source of data you look at. If you look at our website, we are ranked across the nation in the 40th spot, which means we're in the top 10 deadliest states for drunk driving.
Not real good then.
No, not at all. We have seen some progress. The research that was done over last year's statistics and released in May says that we're down to about 42% of the fatalities on our roadways being alcohol related, which is about a 7 to 8% drop.
So 4 out of 10 fatalities on Louisiana roads involves drunk driving.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's way overrated for the amount of decision making. It's the difference between arranging for a designated driver before you leave home and remembering that that's the person that doesn't drink anything, not the one who's the least drunk, or planning ahead the extra $20 for a cab, the friend you're going to call.
Let's talk about the fact, and you've mentioned that Louisiana has some pretty tough laws in this area. I think you referred when we were discussing aggressive laws.
Mm-hmm. Louisiana has some of the most aggressive laws.
So how do we have some of the most aggressive laws and yet we're in the top 10 deadliest states?
Well, implementation and application of those laws are a challenge sometimes, and that runs across the criminal justice spectrum.
So where does that happen? I mean, you got to have the legislature pass the law that says you can't do this, and if you do this, this is what happens. You have to have the police officers and sheriff deputies go out and do the checkpoints and bust people and arrest them. You got to have the prosecutors, the assistant DAs and DAs going after these folks. And then you have to have the courts finding them guilty and imposing these type of conditions. Where are we breaking down? Legislature? Is it the prosecutors? Is it the police officers? The judges? What is it?
Well, I don't think there's any one single place that you can point the finger, because the system as a whole has to work together to be effective. And depending on where you are in the state, each aspect of the system might be a little stronger or a little weaker than the others. Places where it does tend to fall apart are systems of our own that we create. The average DWI arrest will take an officer 3 to 4 hours. By the time they do the paperwork, they do the field sobriety test, they take them in and have them blow into the intoxilizer, and they process them through booking. That's a lot to do for an officer, and a lot of other demands are on the street. There are burglaries, there are robberies, there are rapes.
They have to prioritize.
So there are decisions that have to get made, and unfortunately not everybody looks, it depends on what context you're looking at the issue of drunk driving in. Am I going to deal with this murder downtown? Am I going to deal with this drunk driver that just passed me?
Interesting.
How do you
so just resources. Certainly one of the issues is resources.
Absolutely. It's tough decisions for everybody.
Well, let's go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you get into the actual, you've gotten the arrest out of the way, so you've got an offender who needs to be dealt with. You know, you get into how the DAs prosecute or the prosecutors route their clients. A lot of people view DWI as, well, it's a mistake, especially a first DWI. So there are a lot of programs out there that allow people to bypass a conviction by going through a different set of steps and similar to a probation, but it gives them an education. When that's done properly, we don't have proof that it's effective with offenders, but it's neutral. The hard part of that is it's not always done effectively. I mean, the research tells us that an offender needs 12 months of mandated treatment to have any real impact in their behavior.
We're talking about treatment in terms of education or treatment for an addiction?
Both. Education, if that's the lowest level of education. Of course, if somebody is addicted, they need to be in a more formal, longer treatment program, but 12 months of closely monitored education is required to make a difference.
Okay, let's continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith, Legal Lines, and Donna Tate with MADD for the chapter of Louisiana. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself, Sean Fagan, and Corey Ogeron, and our entire staff for letting us come into your homes for the last 10 years via Legal Lines. We hope that you've come to a greater understanding of how the law works and how the government works for you. So from all of us, thank you. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith. Welcome back to Legal Lines. Again, we're very pleased to have on the show Donna Tate. She's the Executive Director for Mothers Against Drunk Driving here in Louisiana. Again, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for teaching us. And I want to again point out to the folks that the website is such a wonderful resource for not only the information that we're talking about to educate themselves and their children, but also to help provide services for folks.
Absolutely.
Tell the folks a little bit what other services are provided by MADD.
Well, MADD in Louisiana offers, obviously, victim services. We'll accompany victims to court, help them navigate the system, connect them with crime victims reparations, whatever their particular individual and unique
Those are
needs
all a big deal, though. Kind of go into a little bit more detail. When you say accompany them to court and help them in the process, that's a big deal.
Yeah, we have trained victim advocates who are familiar with how a case will progress through the system. Most people who come in contact with a drunk driving crash or fatality have never had contact, the victims, with the criminal justice system. So they're not familiar with the concept of a continuance, which happens multiple times and extends the time that this person that they want to see brought to justice takes to have that be accomplished. And
communication with the district attorney or the assistant DA prosecutor that's doing it is a big deal.
Absolutely.
Because they don't know what they don't know, and if you don't tell them, you can't blame them.
That's exactly right. And DAs have caseloads that are astronomical. Huge. So having somebody that can advocate and say, no, that short answer is not all we need. We need a bigger answer to that question. The average citizen doesn't know that to say, whoa, time out. I deserve a better answer than that. I know you're busy, but I need this piece of your time.
Well, and the other interesting thing is in my experience, when I've got some folks who are very impassioned about what's happened to them, we got some smart folks out there, and they're going to go do all the research they need to, and they can find all kinds of information about the events of the person, and they can provide that information to the prosecutor to follow up on if they need to.
They sure can.
That's a big deal.
They sure can, and it is so amazing to see some of our victims and the extent that they'll go to, but they do have that passion. They've had something taken away from them that can never be replaced.
That's right.
Can never be replaced. So the motivation is 10 times what it would be, 1,000 times what it would be for anybody else.
And let's face it, our system is not set up to deal with a loss like this. You have the criminal component, you can put that person behind bars, you can sue them and get insurance money. We even have in Louisiana punishment damages, where not only are you awarded compensatory damages for all your pain and suffering, but you can receive an award to punish that individual. But that doesn't fix it.
No, it doesn't replace the loved one or the injury or the lifetime of physical therapy or mental health services that somebody needs because of the fatality or the injury.
And I think it's so important because we've talked about educating the prosecutor, but also the offender needs to be educated on what the consequences of the act are.
Absolutely. We offer what are called victim impact panels throughout the state every month. And our victims actually take time out of their life to tell their stories to first and second offense DWI offenders. And what we hope to do in that is, one, aid our victims in healing, because as they can talk about it and share about it, they're taking something that's very negative, that's a tragedy in their life, and they're turning it into something positive. For the offenders, we hope that it opens their eyes and gives them a little different perspective. So many of them will tell us in their surveys afterwards, I never thought it was about anybody but me. It's my decision, it's my body, it's my car, I can do this, I'm not hurting anybody. Well, nobody ever intends to kill anybody in a drunk driving crash. And when they hear these stories, they're able to get a little different perspective. Yeah, there are other people on the road with me.
Well, and MADD is in every single state and 2 other territories, and it was all begun by a mama who lost a 15-year-old daughter.
13-year-old daughter walking to the neighborhood fair, and she was struck by a drunk driver. Candy Lightner was her
And so one individual can make a huge difference in this world. Let's talk about the groups, because you've got the group of offenders who are the adults, and the system prosecutes them in the way that we're talking about, put the technology, put them in jail. We've got our ways that we deal with them, maybe not always effectively, but we're trying. And then you got the kids. And the kids are really at risk, given peer pressure and how young they start drinking, and they get behind the wheel of a car, which is a missile.
Absolutely.
Explain to the folks how we're trying to deal with the kids.
Well, in our efforts to prevent underage drinking, what we want to do is have kids have the information they need to make good decisions. The Surgeon General says kids need that information 5 to 6 years before they're faced with a decision. In Louisiana, our kids start to drink at just under 11 years old. We need to be talking to our first graders and our second graders. how to make good decisions about what they put into their bodies, what happens when they put toxic substances. And alcohol is toxic.
It's killing
to
your
kids under
brain
21.
cells. That's why you have that experience.
How that affects them and how they can make decisions and stand up to their peers and say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to wait until I'm 21. And how to handle the peer pressure as they get older. So that when they hit 6th grade and somebody says, okay, here's your first offer of a drink, how they can safely say no to that and walk